Good evening, and I call to order the February 2nd, 2022 regular council meeting going to be starting at 6 p.m. And at this time, I'd like to confirm the agenda. Are there any emergent items from any of the councillors? Councillor Lang-May, and then Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tonight I'm requesting that we add to the agenda an item under heading 12.1 for a proclamation for Black History Month in Strathmore.
Thank you. And just a quick question, where did you state where we're putting that or where you'd like to have it put?
12.1, please.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Thank you. And Councillor Pete, I guess we have to, sorry, follow procedure. We'll need to have a vote on that. Jonathan, do you want to just give us a quick rundown on our procedure?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think if we get all the amendments in the motion to amend the agenda, I think that would suffice. So we can vote on all amendments at one point.
Okay, so when the second one comes up as well, we can vote on both together?
That's true.
Okay, Councillor Peterson, you had one that you wanted to add an emergent item.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to add an emergent item under 24.1A in camera under section 15.1.
Now, a question for you, Jonathan. If council is to vote on this, how would they if they didn't know what each of the items were about? I'm a little curious about that part of it.
Sorry, thank you, Your Worship. So right now, I believe the motion would be to accept the agenda as amended to include item 12.1, proclamation regarding Black History Month in February.
Yeah.
And then the second item would be advice from officials, VoIP section 24.1A. Would there be a topic that we can include on that motion, Councillor Peterson?
Yes, Your Worship. I think that we could say it is a discussion around community expectations around medical preparedness.
Okay. So we'll need to have a motion then for both of those being added to the agenda as emergent items. And that one would be, I think that one we can move into, it'll be in camera. Sorry, you're right. You stated the section and everything. So Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
I can move the amended agenda with those amendments.
Thank you. And Jonathan, are we okay with that? Do we need them all restated or are we good?
Through your worship, I believe there's just the two amendments, item 12.1 proclamation for Black History Month and 15.2, which was in regards to advice from officials, section 24.1A. If council's happy with that, that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. So we have that motion on the floor from Deputy Mayor Montgomery. So I'll call that question. All in favor? And the motion is carried. Jonathan?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to confirm, did we make a motion to reschedule today's meeting to be held virtually?
No, we'll need to do that too. Thank you for that. So Council, on your script, you'll see there's a motion coming in after I call to order the meeting, and we can, just before we confirm the agenda, we were supposed to talk about the virtual meetings. Councillor Lang-May.
I'll move that council reschedule the February 2nd, 2022 regular council meeting to be held virtually.
Thank you for that motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We have no presentations or recognitions tonight. And under delegations, we have 4.1, Strathmore and District Agricultural Society. And Ryan Schmidt is here from the Strathmore Ag Society. Just a reminder, you have a 10-minute presentation period. I believe you have a PowerPoint for the public and for us to look at. And then there may be questions and comments from councilors as well. So we look forward to hearing from you, and it's nice to see you again in the new year.
Thank you, Mayor. It's wonderful to see you all as well, and especially to the new councilors, that some of whom I'm speaking with for the first time. Thank you all for taking some time to hear from the Agricultural Society tonight. Kathy Terrian-Dusome, our president, she was on, but she said she got disconnected and can't get back in. So I don't know what happened there, but I will just carry on and we'll see if she arrives. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And, you know, for many years, the Agricultural Society has had what was once, I'd say, a dream to have a Western Event Center in Strathmore and District. And in 2019, we took the step of developing our 5-year strategic plan. And really at the heart of that strategic plan was to include this project. So we've been working hard on it since then, and getting to a point where we have a presentation and are able to share our conceptual design of it today, and really to share with you, I think, the vision that we have for what this Western Event Center will do, not only for the Agricultural Society, but for the town and the county as well. So over the last year, Denise Peterson, you were involved, Councillor, thank you for your help. We struck an advisory committee that led to this design. It had representatives from the town of Strathmore, Wheatland County, the Agricultural Society, and then also representatives from various Western sports and disciplines, as well as other groups such as 4-H and community groups. The idea was to bring forward everybody's input and develop a facility that we knew would meet a broad range of needs within the community. And we think we've successfully done that. So the idea here is we don't want this thing to come out the gates and flunk. We want it to be well used, and we want it to serve our mission as an agricultural society, which as a nonprofit is really to reach out and support agriculture and various groups involved in agriculture and related sports such as rodeo and other Western equine disciplines. So that was really what's at the heart of it. And we think we've got a concept that not only meets everyone's needs, but can be fiscally sustainable in the long term. And so do you all have the presentation in front of you?
Yes, I believe we all do.
Great. So if you turn to the first page on it, you can see this is really about our vision. It's that by 2025, Strathmore and Wheatland County is home to a state-of-the-art Western Event Center. This isn't a simple riding arena. There's many riding arenas around. This is really a gathering place, a place for large events, but it's also something that will attract hundreds of visitors to the region and the town every weekend, and thousands for special events. We envision that it would include a year-round rodeo academy, the only of its kind in Canada, and a practical ranching school attached to it, and using the rest of our land at this site, which is approximately 151 acres. So the Rodeo Academy would be a year-round program, similar to if somebody signed up for hockey or for ringette or soccer. You know, rodeo doesn't have that. We put on rodeo schools once in a while, once a year at the Ag Society, and it's the largest in Canada already. But this would be a year-round program, or at least during the school year. And we envision families moving here to live and go to school in our town while taking part in the Rodeo Academy. Really, it's a central feature of this. Equally important, though, associated with this facility is the practical ranching school, which we would work with high schools and colleges on certifying. But the idea here is that it's for practical skills. Maybe you grew up in town, maybe you grew up in the city, and you would love to work in agriculture. Well, this is an opportunity for you to learn firsthand. It would be a year-round program where you could learn everything from calving to doctoring cattle, to cutting hay and feeding, nutrition, all these aspects that go into learning how to work on a ranch. We would have a certificate at the end that would basically qualify someone to go on then and find work in agriculture. So we really envision it meeting a whole, perhaps not a whole, but an area that needs to be addressed definitely in the agricultural sector. So the type of events that we see coming to this facility include all the Western disciplines. Some of them are listed here, but more so, we've put huge doors on this facility so you can get farm equipment in, you can get RVs in, you can put matting across the ground to hold concerts. It's going to hold up to 2,000 people. So we'd have a year-round facility in Strathmore then to put on large events. Gone will be the days where you have to go to Airdrie for everybody's dance recitals for their kids. You could do it in Strathmore. So those are some of the side benefits. And really, we see it as a home to make available to 4-H and many youth organizations available or participating in agriculture as well. And as you'll see, there's a separate event center attached to it that can hold up to 600 people for weddings, receptions, conventions, AGMs, and these type of things. So you could really have a Western event going on and another event at the same time. Some of the regional benefits on the next page that we see coming to the area of our course, significant local economic impact to hotels, restaurants, agricultural supply chain businesses. And we would envision that other organizations would spring up around this. Spin-off benefits by attracting concerts, conventions, trade fairs, and more. And the idea of this facility is that as a nonprofit, our goal really is to serve those groups like 4-H, like Wheatland County Cowboys and Cowgirls, youth organizations. And so we would make this facility available at a very low cost during the week. And we would pay the bills with the large events on the weekend, which would have the large economic impact for the area. It also, we believe, enhances the town and county branding as a place where agriculture and agribusiness thrives and really brings our Western heritage front and center. So we are in the process of conducting a feasibility study for this. So I shouldn't say we haven't started it yet, but we have the proposal and we're getting some grant funding together for that. It's going to happen in the first quarter. And this is to do rigorous third-party analysis of the benefits of this project so that we can bring verifiable evidence forward to all the user groups that this really makes sense. And if it doesn't, we'll find out through that feasibility study too. We believe it does, but we need to prove it. And so we'll be working on that in the short term. The facility would be operated by the Agricultural Society. On the next page, you can get a little bit of an idea of the context. So this site would be on Agricultural Society land, just 1 mile outside of Strathmore. It's just to the east at the corner of Township Road 244 and Range Road 250. And that's where we own about 150 acres of land in addition to the land that we have in Strathmore. If you look at the main building plan here, you can see in the center, that's the event center facility and arena itself. The long barn going out at the bottom, that is horse stall rentals. And then in the parking lot, there is space for 250 to 300 electrified parking spots. These are very important because we've learned from meeting with other Western event facilities that a huge portion of the revenue that keeps these places alive is people who come in, install their horses over the weekend for the bigger events, and they bring their trailer, which is also a camper, and they plug in and they rent an electrical space for the weekend as well. So that's important. It's even more important than the revenue that the facility itself generates. And that's what's going to help keep this to be feasible in the long term. On the next page, you can get an idea of the interior layouts. You can see the arena here. It's 120 by 200 feet, and that covers all Western disciplines. It can work for any of them. And we know that from the feedback we got from our expert advisory panel. You can see there's 1,500 to 2,000 seat capacity. There's a commercial kitchen and an event space. On the next page with the interior layouts, this just highlights that separate event space I was talking about earlier. You can see on the bottom right there, there's kind of pictures of tables. To the left of it is a line. That is a retractable wall. So really, this is the mezzanine, the upper floor above the lobby. And this can house events for up to 600 people. The commercial kitchen is in the basement. Tons of washroom facilities, and there's elevators for disabled access as well. And you can see the VIP suites lining the rodeo arena as well. And those are going to help generate revenue as well to cover the cost of this facility. On the next page, featured additions. So land usage, Really, this is to highlight that horse stall rental facility that I mentioned. And also jutting out the north end of the facility, there's this rough stock area, but it also has a concrete floor and can be used to be rented out for other events as well. On the final page is our status report. So we had always envisioned this taking place in a phased approach. Phase 1 is what we completed last year, the conceptual design, which I've showed you here today, completing the cost estimate, and we commenced our development permit process, which is ongoing with Wheatland County right now. That'll continue into 2022. During this year, we're going to complete our full financial model, our feasibility study, and once that's complete, and we're confident that we have a facility that's sustainable, that's when we'd go forward with our fundraising efforts to pull together the capital we need to construct this. And we would have envisioned that being a combination of corporate support, the Agricultural Society itself taking out a mortgage on the facility, and hopefully some contributions from levels of government as well. Finally, we would envisage that, next, the final investment decision would take place in 2023. Followed by detailed design and the commencement of construction. We'd hope to have it done that year because it's the 50th anniversary of the Ag Society, but that's probably a little bit bullish, but we'll try. And then phase 4 is operations and fulfillment. That's where we've got our nonprofit groups in during the week. We're hosting events every weekend. And we'd be able to launch our Rodeo Academy and Ranching School. And we'd like to have all this rolling by 2025. So that's an update on what we've been up to on this front at the Ag Society. And hopefully I didn't go over my 10 minutes. I tried to keep, although I had tons of things I want to say, I tried to keep it nice.
You did a great job. You did a great job, Ryan.
Thank you.
So are there any questions from our counselors or comments from our counselors for Mr. Schmidt? Counselor Wegener.
Ryan, I really enjoyed your presentation. I've looked over this several times over the last few days. I think it's a great thing you have going there. I think you pretty much answered most of my questions with the corporate sponsorship and various things like that you're pursuing. Just one thing with your practical ranching school, you mentioned that they'd end up with a certificate upon completion. Is there any chance that this could be a recognized educational facility, such as, like, I'm throwing out Olds College type of thing?
For sure. Great question. And that's definitely where we want to head with this. We would like to, if it's possible, work with the high schools in the region on the Green Certificate program, which would allow high school students to gain credits by working at the ranch. And we would also reach out to probably especially Olds College, but perhaps others, to develop a recognized certificate program at that level as well. We have all the people in this region, ranching and farming, to do the teaching and to put the whole program together. And there's a bunch of people who've already volunteered to be part of our ranching committee that would oversee it. But we do need that. We do need that recognition, I think, to really have this school take off. We may start with our own certificate, but we would be very quickly moving forward with looking to do agreements with the high schools and colleges for sure. It's a great point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wegener. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think one of the other things that related to what Councillor Wagner brought up in terms of education, we have huge opportunities to do multi-hub post-secondary education in this community. And it fits in very well with what Ryan said, and the programs already exist both at the high school and the post-secondary level. So it would be, it would just simply it would ensure that the Ag Society in this process would have people knocking on their door, because it is unique, and there are all kinds of opportunities to add modules to the structure that exists today. And for a long time, our community has run green certificate programs, but not with this accommodation. And so it would just be a huge boon. We already have people moving to the community so that their children can access what is available in green certificate program. And so this would just add another whole element. Brian, the other thing that since the inception of the building and some of the advertisement that went into community, there have been all kinds of people in the county coming forward with questions. And one of the questions was, when you were doing the rental stalls, those are event-based rentals, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So one of the things that people are questioning now, they see and they understand the potential in this. So people are actually now talking about doing horse boarding businesses on the periphery of community. So that's a real value added as well. And the other thing that I want to say to the Ag Society is that you, in your development of this, have so well reflected the new strategic plan of the town of Strathmore and Rural Reimagined. This brings that to life in a way that nothing else could have. And so our partnership is extremely well placed. My final question, one of the things that I've heard in our family with the rodeoing that's gone on in our family over the years is that a national finals high school rodeo has never been held in Canada, and that Strathmore was the only place that was positioned to do that, and now will be extraordinarily well positioned with this. And so in 2028, we could move the National High School Rodeo Finals from Gillette, Wyoming to Strathmore, Alberta. And the American community is really keen on that. They've wanted to come to Calgary, but Calgary isn't situated to do that because it brings about 40,000 people with trailers into their downtown. So they look for periphery communities. And so I think we'd be very, very well positioned to look at that in our future. And I really thank you for the presentation and for the work of your society.
Thanks, Denise. And I love that idea. I do think that this facility would put us at the top of the list for a destination for the high school rodeo finals. So yeah, I love that idea.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Mayor. To Ryan and to Kathy, I don't know if she's watching, just thank you for all the work for this, and seriously, how exciting is this? Ryan, I wondered if you could speak to a little bit about the site location. I wondered if that is just because that's land that you guys already currently have, or if there's some other advantages to that spot.
Yeah, great question, Councillor Wiley. So the location is on Ag Society land. We've held this land for quite a while. It might even be 15, 20 years. It's 1 mile east of town. Like I said, at the corner of Township 244 and Range Road 250. The one little parcel that's out of it there, you can see beside the blue, that's A Farms, where they have the specialty pigs. So there's probably some synergies there as well. The location is great for us because we already have it, obviously, but we see it as a great, it's so close to the town of Strathmore, and yet it's also in Wheatland County, which I think allows us to bring benefits to both regions, and really access those services that are available in Strathmore for the people that are attending these events. I mean, if it were 20 miles out, that would be a different story, that you wouldn't have those services around it and that base to build on. And the second thing is, sorry, I was just thinking, yeah, so the practical ranching school can also go at this site. So out of those 150 acres, this takes up 60. So there's only 90 acres left, but that's okay. We don't envisage, having a full-fledged ranch here, with thousands of acres. The point is that this is a teaching facility. So it's going to be a significant enough herd of cattle for you to do all the things that you would do on a ranch, without having to own, 3,000 acres of land, which would obviously be unreasonable for us. So we can do that with 90 acres. We can definitely, you can teach everything from fencing to calving to doctoring, nutrition, and all the parts of a program like that with that amount of space. And so I guess that's kind of why we see it as a perfect fit. We don't have enough room on our land in Strathmore to add the facility there. Taking 60 acres out of that would really make Strathmore Stampede unworkable. And that's an important point. The idea here is not to the Strathmore Stampede will stay where it is at our outdoor facility in Strathmore. But I could see additional events during the Strathmore Stampede weekend now happening on top, perhaps cattle shows and things like that at the indoor facility. So I think it's only going to enhance and build Strathmore Stampede, but it definitely does not move the location of Strathmore Stampede. I don't know if I actually answered what you were looking for in that whole bet.
I do have another question. We also just had a delegation from Bruce Kleiber with Legacy Farms.
Yes.
You spoke about synergies. I just wonder, I guess I don't really need an answer at this point so much as just put this in your mind that would be something worth exploring as well if you're talking about working with other groups.
Thank you. And I have met with him a couple of times, and I've toured the land there, and he's given me a bit of the layout of what they're trying to do, and it's a great project. And really, I just see them as going, right down parallel tracks. And at some point, there's definitely going to be pieces of these projects that are going to fit together, and they're going to make sense, and they will join up at those points, I'm sure. But really, I think like both of them contribute to a branding opportunity and enhancement of Strathmore's branding throughout the province and really the country in a really impactful way. I'm so excited about the Legacy Farms project as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Any other questions or comments from councillors? Seeing none, thank you, Ryan, for your presentation. It was very clear. I love the energy, and I really look forward to hearing more about how it's going. And best of luck with your feasibility study. It was good seeing you again, and thank you for presenting.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors and administration. Have a good evening.
Take care.
Bye now.
And that brings us to 4.2 framework. We have a delegation here. This deals with the citizen satisfaction survey. Jeff, are you introducing our presenter?
Thank you, Mayor. A very quick introduction. I've worked with Alec on a few different projects. He's a really great guy. We were really fortunate to partner with Framework on this. They do really exceptional work around like citizen and member satisfaction surveys. So I'm very happy to introduce Alec Milne from Framework Partners to provide the results of the 2021 Citizen Satisfaction Survey.
And Alec, I'd like to welcome you on behalf of Town Council. And I just want to tell you that since this was a town project, we engaged your group to do this survey. You will not be limited to the 10-minute presentation. So this is an important thing for our town to look at and learn from, and just see how our citizens feel about their living experience here in the town of Strathmore. So welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. I hope everybody's got a full cup of coffee, because we're going to talk stats for a few minutes. So I'll try and not bore everybody too much. I got good news to report. Canada's tied versus Great Britain in the mixed double curling at the Olympics, so that's very important as well. With your permission, sir, I'll share my screen if that's all right, and I have a bit of a presentation PowerPoint here to.
You bet.
Thank you. So thank you for the opportunity. We've been very pleased to work with Jeff and work with the team. And what over the last few months to really understand what the results of the survey actually mean. And so we're going to talk about a few things, what it is you asked us to do, what it is we found out, and maybe some top line learnings. But if you have questions and pieces, I'd be very pleased to answer them as we go. The research objectives that you had given us as a team were mostly to be consistent with the surveys that had been conducted in the past, so that we could do inter-period comparisons, which is really the gold standard, of course, for surveying. Any survey is a snapshot at a period of time, and it is not necessarily representative for any other time than when it was taken. And so really one of the most important things is trending and inter-period trending, and seeing how we're doing, whether things are going up and going down. Is this survey itself was actually, first of all, we're tasked, well, make sure you do correct thif right? So clearly, if people are surveying about whether or not they love living in Canada right now, they might have a little different opinion than when they live here, when they mention, if you survey them when they're doing, whether you're a Stampede or if they're at versus in the cold. That's really important. This survey was conducted in the late spring, early summer of last year. Very pleased to respond to it now, but it really is a bit of a report. These are a bunch of trophies. We don't ask for these. We get given them sometimes. The only trophy on here that I'm super proud of is that one, which is actually a golfing trophy that I won for actually a real PGA event. This really talks about how accurate everything is. Now, I know I don't normally put in cartoons on these things, but the point of it is we take great pains to make sure that we choose people who respond to the survey, randomly selected, so that everybody in town has an opportunity, every household in town has an opportunity to participate in the survey because they've been randomly selected in that sample. We spoke to just under 800 respondents. 85% of them got through to the end of the survey. It's good for a margin of error, plus or minus 3.4%, 19 times out of 20. We did through the survey and through the public survey, which was non-representative, talked to a total of about 9% of the citizens of your fair town. And so we're very, very confident that we don't have, there's very little probability of something called non-response bias, of those who didn't respond to the survey thinking differently than those who did. The only difference between those who responded and those who didn't respond to the survey is that those who didn't are probably a little bit, who like, probably like surveys even less than those who did respond to the survey. So on an overall basis, I actually think it's a very accurate sample. It's a very strong sample. And we think that their odds of there being non-response bias are actually quite low. So with that, I'll actually get into the data of it. Now, this is the big question. Generally we'd call this GenSat, or here we're calling it QOL. It's quality of life. This is a big question. One of the big questions asked right in the initial part of the survey, so we can get everybody's reaction to it. It's asked on a 7-point Likert scale. How would you rate the overall quality of life in Strathmore today? And in the 7-point scale is very deliberate. We're trying to push people off the fence. If you ask the people this question on a 10-point scale, the data is always going to be biased because most people think 5 is the midpoint between 1 and 10, and it's not. 5 is the midpoint between 0 and 10. So you positively bias your data if you use a 10-point scale. If you use a 4-point scale, all the data clumps on 2. Really technical term there, clump. Technical term. And so if you use a 5-point scale, same thing happens. So I really want to understand, okay, I understand you think it's good, but is it somewhat good or very good? I'm trying to push you off the fence a little bit. Because if you say somewhat good, that's a big difference between very good, right? And so, generally we would add the top 3 to try to get the overall metric, and also to be able to do inter-period comparisons with the 2019 survey. But often people saying very good are simply people who are being Canadian. They're being nice. They don't want to say otherwise. If you capture someone as they walk out of a restaurant and you say, how was that experience? Were you satisfied with that experience? Most of them would, and they say somewhat good. No one's going into that restaurant based on that recommendation. So I am a little worried about this 10 to 15% here, but on an overall basis, though, if we compare the top 3, your top 3 score is at 95%. That is an excellent score. And it's an excellent score for a number of reasons. One is because there's a lot of stuff going down right now in society in general. When we're seeing, as we survey across the country, we just came out of the field of the survey in Moncton. Last week I was presenting in Medicine Hat. And we do a lot of surveying, and as a result of that, we can see some comparisons. We do have municipalities and areas that we've surveyed for on the West Coast where they've had quality of life and general satisfaction drop by 5 and 10 and even up to 15% in 1 year. And it's because of what's going on with respect to the pandemic and in Alberta, with also what's going on with respect to the economy, externalities. So you are being faced that. So you say, well, is a 3-point drop in overall satisfaction good or bad? I think it's an excellent score. Now, remember, the margin of error is 3.4%, 19 times out of 20. So that is within the margin of error. So it's not a statistically significant change. And actually, I think it's a good score considering all of the externalities that are and all the things that are happening in society more broadly. So you'll see me talk about quality of life all the way through. And this is the question I'm referring to as I do that. Now, we followed that question up with another question. It's an unaided recall. It's an empty box. You can type in anything you want. So, okay, well, what drives that? What do you, why are you happy or unhappy with life in the town of Strathmore? If they mention words like amenities or parks and paths and green spaces, or whether they have a sense of community, look how high their quality of life is. It's up into the high 90s, up in, really nice, strong scores. But if they mention things like costs and affordability of living in Strathmore or the downtown area, perhaps, or maybe I didn't like there's too much growth, all of a sudden their quality of life actually drops considerably. So really, there are almost really 2 camps in the city. And one camp is really loves the amenity, loves the sense of community, and really expressed it as such in the survey on an overall basis. And those are the majority. When you look at these numbers, they're quite a bit larger from those who are worried about recycling. It's only six out of 733. Less than 1% of your respondents mentioned that. But clearly there are things that drive dissatisfaction. If they really like living there, like the community, and it's friendly and it's nice and the amenities are strong, then boy, it's all systems go. It's very, very strong and very, very high. Now, if we look about whether or not they think it has improved or it hasn't improved. Now, we just saw in the overall score that it dropped by 2 or 3 points. Well, but that's not the perception of those who we surveyed this time. Their perception on an overall basis is that the quality of life has actually improved over the past 5 years. Now, if you look at both ends of the scale, you see there's actually very few people who really think it's gotten a lot worse. And those who think that it has improved are outnumber those who think it has not improved by a margin of 4 to 1. So really things are quite a bit stronger here. I mean, really is a strong relationship. And, if I think it's positive, then I think it's getting better. If I think it's negative, then I think it's getting worse. And so you see those pieces here. Certainly there's a lot of people saying, no, it's been good then, it's good now. Okay, that's fine. But those who say, no, it's strongly improved, their satisfaction levels actually with quality of life is actually up over 90%. In some cases, it's actually up at 100. So overall, most people think the quality of life has improved. If you go to top 3, it's really quite strong. In fact, top 3 gets you over 50%, right to about 50% who believe it's improved. Now, tax value. Now, you can see on the previous slide that how tax value and quality of life really track together. And that's true. The correlation between the two is actually quite strong. So if someone thinks that there is a strong tax value here, they're most likely to say, no, I really like living here. I think the quality of life here is quite strong. I would also say that you probably hear quite a bit from the sort of the bottom 2 or the bottom 2 or 3 categories. You probably hear an awful lot about those 8% who are strongly saying it's terrible, and 16% is saying it's pretty bad. And you compare that to your top 2 or your top 3. Well, they've got 75% of your residents are saying actually we get good value for the tax dollars here. So it is pretty strong. It's pretty strong. And then what's the name? Well, this is a question. It's a silly question, but it's actually a silly question that works. And so really what we say, well, if you could use one word to describe the town, what would that one word be? We're not actually trying to test their ability to come up with a word. What we're trying to do is think of unaided recall. They might say fantastic, and they might say terrible. All right, well, we're going to take all of those words and we're going to do something called sentiment analysis. Or we're going to look to see the emotion that they're putting in with the words. Well, if you start reading down the list, the most popular words, and it drops off really quickly to less than 1% within the top 20. But if you read down that list, you see friendly, home, comfortable, community, quiet, peaceful, pleasant, great, quaint. All of those words are super positive. And you can also see that in the quality of life. The first negative word is boring. And that's a 30%. And frankly, the older I get, the more I think boring is okay. So I'm not sure about this, but clearly, if they're a young person and maybe they want nightlife or whatever, maybe that might not be the piece for them. But you can also see as well the difference between good to great. If someone says great, their overall satisfaction is 100%. If they say good, it's at 80, and if they say average, their quality of life satisfaction is actually at 33%. So it really does drive the impression that really good is not always good enough, that you got to get to great in order for it to really drive quality of life. So I think very positive response here. In fact, if you toss it up into a word cloud and you have a strategic planning exercise and say you have an envisioning thing. So who do we want to be in 10 years or in 15 years? You'd say this, right? There'd be very few words in here that probably you wouldn't want to use. What do you like most about living in Strathmore? And once again, this is a summary of a big open-ended question. There's lots of people like the size of the town. There's lots of people who really like the community and the sense of community itself. And once again, it's nice and friendly, and the proximity to Calgary is also in there. Some people mention amenities, and if you do mention amenities, they really talk about quality of life. There really is a strong piece in here. If they talk about traffic, then all of a sudden, no big surprise. Their quality of life determination is actually quite a bit lower. So maybe they're talking about the commute to Calgary. Maybe they're talking about the the rush minute in Strathmore, or what is it? So I think on an overall basis, that's clear. In fact, our research has proven that to be true right across the country. When we do research in Ontario and Toronto, and you listen to the complaints about traffic there, it's a whole nother thing. That actually drives us the number one issue in most cities, not often talked about. What do you like least? Now, this is best, right? So there's like 15, 16 things, and everybody kind of agrees on what the top ones are. And what do you like least? Well, it's all over the place. Now, these are in alphabetical order, they're not in orders, but so in other words, if you're unhappy with living in Strathmore or with what's happening in Strathmore, it's far more likely to be individual to you, right? So everyone agrees that amenities are great, but people say like least, they actually want more amenities. They're not saying the amenities are bad, they're saying that they actually want more amenities. And the big drivers are lack of community friendliness. So not everyone has found a community in Strathmore, but if they did, all of a sudden they love living there, and their satisfaction, people are nice, friendly, it's children, families, that's kind of stuff. It's really, really strong. So it's a really big, and not everybody digs the small town attitude as well. Most do. We did look at it by communities, and you can see that the quality of life really does vary considerably based on which community that you call your home. And it really goes from a high of 90 down to 65%. So really, really does vary quite a bit based on community. Age demographics. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about traditional demographics, but here's the thing. Satisfaction with the quality of life in Strathmore does not vary by age, other than these aren't millennials, these are Gen Zs. In fact, they're late stage Gen Zs. So, every survey ever being conducted right now it samples light on the young age groups. And of course, this survey was distributed using utility bills. So not a lot of people under the age of 25 are paying utilities yet. But on an overall basis, you can see that the quality of life really does not change. And in fact, there's something that's a little bit surprising is actually belief that there's a good tax value increases with age. Now in research, there's something called the grumpy old man. He exists in data. When we first started doing research 35 years ago, you can see the grumpy old man every single time. But that's not happening anymore. Now it's the grumpy millennial, the grumpy late stage Gen Xer. And we're not seeing that with respect to satisfaction, but we are seeing that with respect to the belief whether or not there's strong tax value. In fact, when you do the segmentation based on gender identification, your town profiles really strongly what Stats Canada is, and so it's 52-47. But you can see in the two distinctions here with quality of life that they're within the margin of error. So there's no statistical difference between genders and whether or not there are gender identifications and whether or not they are satisfied with the quality of life. There is a bit of a difference, but not an awful lot. Not like what we're going to see in a few moments. Now, the survey was dominated by homeowners, not surprising because it was distributed through the survey bill, so not a whole lot of learning there. It's very hard, when you have a couple of responses to really make much difference there. But this is one that I actually found to be really interesting. This is tenure. How long have you lived in Strathmore? So clearly people moved to Strathmore intentionally. They didn't grow up there. They chose to live there. And if they choose to live there, the satisfaction with the quality of life is remarkably high. It's at 94%. Starts to wear over time, maybe because they're commuting to Calgary, maybe over time the community's changed a little bit. But once they get to a sort of a turning point, about 15 to 20 years, it starts to really significantly bounce back up again. So really big change there over time. It's hard to understand really what it is that's driving that, but that is a statistically really significant change. I mean, it's almost 30 points, right? Which in the stats world is a massive thing. Also unusual is that satisfaction generally is increasing with education, satisfaction with quality of life. In general, we see the opposite. The more highly educated you are, the more likely you are to be a bit more discerning. That's not the right word, but a little tougher in your judgments, perhaps, with respect to many different things. But clearly that's not true here. Drops off a little bit for those with graduate degrees, but undergraduate degrees, that's the highest satisfaction across the board. And we look and say, well, you live, during the pandemic, did you work inside or outside of the area? Well, they stayed in Strathmore. I mean, you can see clearly that there's no difference with respect to quality of life, but you can see that most people actually continued to work outside of the town. That's where they work, right? So it really influences the old whether or not they're working from home. So how big is how many people live in their household? The big household has always dropped off a little bit from what it used to be a few years ago. And it's most people, it's about 56% of your residents live in 1 or 2 people households. That's pretty big change over time from what we would have seen, 10, 15, and 20 years ago. In fact, you see that with the size of the family. How many children do you have? Well, 60%, 2/3 of the respondents to the survey said none. Or if you do have children, it's 25%. It's between 1 and 2. It's gone are the large nuclear families. Do you identify as being a member of a BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, or people of color? Almost all of our clients now are including questions of this nature as they develop, in their strategic planning exercises, put in these values on their strategic plan. So the question is pretty clear. In Canada, we never used to ask questions like this. In the United States, they always ask. In the United States, they ask really bold-faced questions. Are you Black or are you white? Like questions like that. In Canada, in the research community's never done that. But we found a way, I mean the research community has found a way to actually do this in a manner that's a little bit softer. Do you identify as being a member of the BIPOC community? Those who say that they do, which is at about 5%. Now, remember, nationally, that's at 22%. So in Strathmore, it's at a quarter of the rate what we see elsewhere in Canada. But there is a really significant difference on how you rate the quality of life in Strathmore as to whether or not you're a member of Black, Indigenous, or people of color community. Really significant difference. There's language pieces in here. There's priorities in here in terms of in terms of big pockets of things that you do. So obviously infrastructure and operations is the big piece. So we ask them, so what's important? We ask this on one of those 7-point scales, and then we take the top 2 when we rank them compared to each other. Now, it doesn't mean the planning's not important. It just means on everyone's day-to-day lives, they don't think about it too much. And then we turn right around and we ask them, how satisfied are you with the exact same things? So this is importance and this is satisfaction. And then of course you take one minus the other and you get expectation gaps. So everybody thinks infrastructure is important. In fact, I'd actually like to talk to the 8.2% who don't think that's important. And they rated their satisfaction at top 2 of 52%. If we went top 3, those would be an awful lot closer. But as I say before, the somewhat satisfied is not a strong indication. You have negative expectation gaps right across the board. And that's okay. Every organization does, because you're living in a resource constrained environment. If you didn't, you'd have a lot of money, you could back the truck up, you could dump money on the problem, and all of a sudden a lot of the problem would go away. So the only intention of this really is to really look at where your strategic priorities should be according to your citizens. Because infrastructure and operations has a large expectation gap, as does some of the community services. Not so protective services and not so the town operated recreation facilities. They don't have an expectation gap there, even though they're still very important. If we ask them, what are the most important issues facing everybody? Well, let's say taxes, property taxes. Well, remember that was only mentioned by 13% of the respondents. So yeah, it's number 1, but that's almost because there's a big variety of issues here, but it wasn't mentioned by everybody. In fact, when we actually say, here are all the different things we do, here's 17 pools of things that we do. And so, well, should we increase spending on them? Should we keep it the same with the middle one, or should we decrease it? And when you look at that, there's only one area where they say, every area says the modal response is keep it the same, maintain spending as it is now, except for roads. And roads, in a ratio of almost 10-to-1, people want increased spending on roads. So I think on an overall basis, that's a pretty strong indication of priorities. The rest of them, if you look at the ratio between increasing spending and decreasing spending, it's pretty close 1-to-1. So there really isn't a strong desire to decrease or change spending in many ideas, even though just a moment ago we said, well, property taxes is the number 1 issue, but as soon as you dig down a little deeper, you find out that where the biggest expectation gaps are, it's actually in their infrastructure and community, or in terms of spending. Well, they actually most people don't want the spending to be changed. Even in instances like storm sewers, which had a relatively larger proportion of people saying, I want you to decrease spending, still almost 80% said don't change it. Right? So the ratio of the 2 bottom ends gets a little wonky when the numbers get smaller. But on an overall basis, there's still, they really still want the spending where they have it maintained spending. That's the majority of respond. Lots more questions in here about, much more specific areas in here and satisfaction. But an overall basis, the one thing that I did want to sort of make emphasis on before we break, and I'm sorry, I know I'm about 2 or 3 minutes over time here. I'll try and be quick with the summary of it. Is that we do believe that the data is very strong. It's 3.4, not 13.4. A margin of error 19 times out of 20. The quality of life, those who like living here versus those who don't, it's very strong. It's actually 4-to-1 ratio. 95% of the citizens actually think the quality of life in the town is very, very high. 73% report that they receive value for the 70% of the property taxes that Strathmore maintains. And then we have other significant summaries in here as well, most particularly with respect to demographics, where we know that mostly the quality of life satisfaction does not vary overly by demographics, other than if you identify as being a person of Indigenous, a Black, or a person of color. And then only 20% were aware that the town only maintains 70% of the property taxes that they pay. So, and the expectation gaps really focuses on the programs and services area. So lots of pieces in here, and lots of very, very deep information. And most importantly, I think actually it provides a good basis for comparison as we go forward, as we go back into surveying again in late spring, early summer, before Canada Day in that period. So lots of very strong preferences indicated here, but in overall things, it's a very strong rating, particularly when you compare it to what's happening in the economy at large, and particularly when you compare it to other municipalities. So, sir, I apologize for having gone over time there. I went over by 3 or 4 minutes, but I'd also be very pleased to answer any questions.
Sorry, don't worry, Alec. If you want to carry on more, like, we're not going to limit you to 10 minutes because obviously the survey was, taken on by the town and brought you folks involved. So if you want to, redo anything or talk a little more, it's fine.
No, I'm pleased. I'd be pleased to answer any questions anybody may have.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wiley.
I'll just start with a thank you. I didn't even know how good a survey could be until I read this. There was things on here. I pored over this. I was really interested on page 46 of 54 of your survey.
Yes, sir.
I wondered if this is something that you're typically seeing. So it looked to me like 2/3 of our population actually wouldn't mind a tax increase.
Yeah. Well, it's the eternal disconnect. Everybody wants more services until it comes tax time, right? It's like, so, and this is one of the reasons why we can never ask pricing questions on surveys, and in my opinion, very accurately, because if you ask people whether or not they're happy with the prices that they pay, what are they going to say? They're always going to say, of course I want to pay less, right? It's human nature. But then when you say, well, okay, that's great, but that's fine to understand that you want to pay less taxes, but now help us understand what we should do with that. It's like when they phone you at supper time, surveyors, and say, is the environment important? And you say, of course the environment's important. Well, that's not the right question. The right question is, what are you willing to change in your life as a demonstration that the environment's important? Are you willing to go from 2 cars down to 1? Are you willing not to have a warm weather holiday? All those sorts of things. And then everybody says immediately, oh, hey, let's not be hasty. Right? So, okay, now I understand how important the environment is to you. It's not that important. And it's the same piece here. Well, I want lower taxes. I want lower taxes. All right. So what do you want? Do you want us to cut services to get those lower taxes? And they say, hey, let's not be hasty. Right? And so as soon as you dig a little deeper on some of these elements, some of that desire, now that doesn't mean that they don't want the respect for the taxpayer's dollar. Of course they do. And that doesn't mean that they don't want efficiency and effectiveness. Of course they do. Everybody wants those things. But on an overall basis, it's really only 17%. I don't mean only because that doesn't sound respectful. It is 17% of those who say, no, I want you to cut taxes and cut services, or to cut services to maintaining the current tax levels, right? That, cut services so you don't have to have tax increases. And all of a sudden that really goes a different way. And you can see really, the quality of life element here as well, how it correlates on an overall basis to correlate. Less than 1 in 5 want you to cut taxes and cut services to make taxes. So you're absolutely right when people say, well, number one issue is property taxes. Well, that was only 13% on overall base. It came up number one because all the small, but an overall basis only 13%. So I agree with you. Sorry, long answer to a short question. I think it is an issue, and I think it's a significant issue. The disconnect in some people's minds between their tax bill and the services they receive.
Well, Alec, what would you find that comparable to other communities you've seen, though, that 2/3?
I think it's worse, right? It's worse elsewhere. So, yeah, I mean, it's absolutely worse elsewhere. Now, I wouldn't say necessarily in Alberta, but some of the places we survey for, we do a lot of research out on the West Coast, and you look at there, and the disconnect between the tax bill and the amenities that they receive, and the demand for amenities is really, really strident out there and in other parts of Canada. But they also don't want to pay a lot more taxes. So, like, as my dad used to say when I was a kid, that dog won't hunt. Like those are parallel lines they don't meet, right? Like, yeah, show me how how far can you stretch that rubber band until it snaps?
But are those stats similar to other communities? Like, would you say you'd see a lot of communities that 2/3 of the people are actually responding 1 and 2?
Yes, I mean, it's under 2/3, but yes, yeah, that is typical. We would see that. Yeah, people don't want less rec centers.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Councillor Wegener, and then Councillor Peterson.
Again, Alec, I kind of echo Brent's sentiments with the detail of the survey. I was really impressed with it. But this question more is probably going to go to CAO Scoble, or with the results of this, is this going to be part of our strategic planning, our strategic planning for the future?
Through the chair to the council, yes, this is a key component of council strategic planning that we'll be bringing to you as part of the package for that.
Okay, thank you, CA Scoble, and again, thank you, Alec.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Wegener. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. I think this is just a wonderful presentation, and it's fulsome. And I want to thank Alec and the people in our own organization that have worked to put this together in our community. And I just really think that this is a space to thank everybody that contributes in our community, because that's what makes this satisfaction so high, what makes the satisfaction rate so high. One of the things, Your Worship, that I'm wondering from our communications department or through our CAO is how we can encapsulate this message, this key message, and relate it to our public and in the way that they deserve, that it's meaningful and useful. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Comments from communications or from CAO Scoble?
Thanks very much, Councillor. We're going to be posting the complete report on the website in the transparency and report section. But then beyond that, we're going to be breaking it down into some bite-sized pieces that we'll be able to get out through social media, through our newspaper page there. Just it's a huge amount of information, and so making it digestible is going to take something that will release over a longer period. So anybody who is like me and wants to read the whole report in an evening, absolutely, they'll be able to download it, and we'll be sending people to that page. But people who are just interested in some of the bites from it, we're going to make it palatable for them as well. So does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Director. That's perfect. Thank you.
Thanks.
Can I just follow up on that, Jeff, before you finish? When I looked at some of the ways that people find the information, I was impressed that the top three are the website, the Facebook page, and utility bills. So can we ensure as well that we put some of those bites maybe on a utility bill on the backside or something that when people who may not be as engaged in social media, they'd be able to take a look at the backside, for example, of the utility bill and have some simple, easy information from this survey.
Absolutely, that's a great suggestion, Mayor. We'll do a really nice infographic up.
Okay, thanks.
I'd also say that it's surprising that the death of Facebook is greatly over. Like every survey we do, Facebook is still like the #1 social media tool that people want for communications. Sorry, I interrupted, Jeff. Sorry.
I didn't see TikTok on this at all. Any other questions from our counselors at home? I don't see all of you on screen, so feel free to speak up if you need to. Councillor Wiley?
I just think for us, when we are doing our strategic planning, there's got to be a correlation between this gap that Alec noted, where people have lived here for, I can't remember what it was like 15 to 20 years, ranked their quality of life a little bit lower. And I think there's got to be a correlation to the neighborhoods they're in. Like, you notice some neighborhoods, you think, well, that neighborhood's been there for 15, 20 years. And I was just trying to quickly look at it. The neighborhood list is on page 18. Just wondering like how old those neighborhoods are. Anyway, I think that'll be for us when we're doing strategic planning, is to take a look at a correlation between the neighborhood and the amount of time people have been here. Be interesting.
Yeah, we support strategic planning exercises all the time. And we find that there's two really ways that our clients engage with strategic planning with respect to research. And the first one is that they look for the problem areas and then they try and fix them. That's one approach. Or the other approach is to say, this is who we want to be, whatever that is. And this is sort of who we want to be in terms of, different parts of the community and whatnot, and then focus on what's important to those parts of the community that you have. Both of them are equally valid and both of them are equally productive.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Alex.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. I'll go now to Councillor Mitzner.
I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear you.
Oh, I think you're on mute.
Sorry. I think page 15 of 54 is a great marketing piece for us to use on all our social media. It would also be nice to tie it in, maybe one wall of wallpaper in the main foyer and to run with it. It's got a little bit of negativity. I'm not sure what redneck well maintained means, but
I think there are two different expressions, but they just happen to be side by side. But you're right. You're right.
yeah, but I think it's simple enough for everyone at a quick glance. Some people aren't all about statistics. I think this is a great marketing piece for us. Thank you.
That's crazy talk. Stats are everything, man.
There's only two there that kind of scare me, and one was stinky at the top, and then soulless. Soulless is kind of sad.
Yeah.
That one hurt a little.
Boring is bad. I'd be in trouble. So yeah, I'm not worried. I think overall it's such a positive. It's such a positive piece, and we do not normally get that level of positivity.
Well, that's good. That's good news. Then that's a good news story. Any other comments from councillors? Councillor Peterson.
So, Your Worship, one of the things, and Alec, one of the things that I noticed that you brought to the table was the whiteness of our community and the issues around our BIPOC community related. And so we have some really interesting undertakings in our community right now to address that. But I'm wondering if you would speak to this in terms of how this looks in terms of other communities in Western Canada, and excluding the coast, of course, but in the prairie provinces. Is this a norm, or are we far more white than most communities? And just I'm just thinking about this in terms of our anti-racism initiatives that we're undertaking now, and interested in looking at other communities and some of the strategic processes that they've undertaken to focus on this.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and the answer, of course, as always, is it depends. If you compare you to some of the larger urban centers in the country, they are over 50%. Most of them. I grew up in a town called Brampton, and when I lived there was 15,000 people that was on the sign. Now it's 675,000. in 30 years. You think of how the growth of Calgary, it's unbelievable. Over 50% of the people in Brampton are from Southeast Asia. So, my parents still live in the house I grew up in, and they said, well, my dad said, it's over, the visible minority is now over 50%. Dad, well, that's no longer a minority. So it's the same piece here. The towns in Western Canada they all vary considerably, all the urban centers, urban municipalities, and they all each have a bit of a flavor when it comes to this. There are some communities that are, I hesitate to say more white, but that's the fact of it, that are more white. Chestermere, between your community and Calgary, is not. They have a very large proportion of people who moved here from Southeast Asia. There is a large Chinese community in Chestermere. And in fact, it's actually over 20% of visible minority in Chestermere. Yet, if you go to the other side, if you go to Okotoks, or, they are very white as well. And so the needle really varies. Now, the thing that's uncomfortable for us to talk about is a little bit of truth in this, which is that people cluster. And they don't cluster intentionally. They don't cluster mischievously or anything like that. They just cluster with like-minded people. Now, you guys can't see me. I'm 6'10". I used to play university basketball about 100 pounds ago. And so you'd be surprised to learn that most of my friends are former basketball players, former varsity basketball players, and we all go golfing together and all that. And I don't do that on purpose. It's just there's a bit of a common interest there. And you see that also with this. They don't intentionally move there because it's white, but that actually was what happens at the end of the day. So I would say, and trying to choose my words carefully, that yes, this is a white community. Or a community that does not identify as being a member. Now, do you want to develop strategies based on that? I don't know that you would, but maybe you want to develop strategies based on this, that there is a 15-point difference in the quality of life of those who identify as being a member of that community. And in fact, when you went through some of the open-ended questions, it's saying what has affected your overall satisfaction. Some people did mention racism in here. I don't know if it was big enough to make the top pile, but we did see it once or twice come up. And if they did, of course, discrimination and diversity mentioned by 25 out of 500 people answered that question. And of course, that affects their overall quality of life. Of course it does. So, I mean, is it a big proportion? No, but it is just about everybody who identifies as being a member of a BIPOC community.
I really appreciate that answer, Alec. And I think that it speaks to Councillor Langmaid's motion that she plans on bringing forward later tonight. And, if we had one instead of 25, it would be one too many. And I think that there's just enormous opportunities in being conscious about moving forward in terms of ensuring that this is a community for everyone. And this gives us some insight into moving forward in that. And I very much appreciate your insight. Thank you.
No, you're more than welcome. The only other thing that I would add to that is that some of these perceptions are slow to change. And so if something terrible happened to me and my kids or my spouse or whatever, 5 years ago, that might still influence my opinions today. It might take a long time for that to change. There's been new studies out that actually when you're forming an opinion initially, you just need a balance of evidence of like 55-45. But once you made up your opinion, to change your opinion, the balance of evidence actually has to almost go up to about 90%. So I would I'd be cautious with some of your expectations of how quickly, not that you can't, because of course you can, but how quickly you might be able to move some of these dials on your dashboard.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a quick question just on the same lines that we're talking about. And what I'm wondering is we talked about at the beginning of your presentation, kind of the bias between homeowners and home renters in respondents to the survey. And I'm wondering, is it possible that we're seeing maybe fewer responses from people who identify as members of the BIPOC community because of that variation in respondents that we have between, home ownership and home renting? Perhaps the people in our community, perhaps people who identify as members of the BIPOC community might statistically rent more often than they own. Have you seen that in other communities? I'm just wondering if, I think you're getting the gist of my question there.
Yeah, so unfortunately, we don't have enough data here to me, because we only have two who said that they rent, and doing correlations with two respondents, it would get specious pretty quickly. But and we didn't ask the LGBTQ2 plus question. Some communities are asking that question, and some aren't. So we're here to try and inform the decisions that you're making. So we weren't asked to ask that question. I'll be honest with you, I've never felt comfortable asking any of these questions, and not necessarily because there's anything bad or anything good, because it's just data. But in the answer with the LGBTQ question is that it's very difficult for people to answer that question, and it's not because now they might identify, but there's some people who haven't come to the realization where they are in their lives. And how do they answer those sorts of questions? Oh, you phoned me at supper time and you asked me about my sexuality. Well, what are the odds of, like, A, none of your business, and so, so it's very hard for research. In fact, there's never been any research that I'm aware of ever that is anyone that's been peer reviewed that everyone feels is really happy with research in that area in terms of identification. So I don't know, and I would really hesitate to say generally that those who identify as being a member of the community, of that community, are whether or not they're more or less prosperous. I wouldn't want to comment on that. I don't have evidence of that one way or the other. But other than, as always, when we survey, our number one objective is to be as respectful as humanly possible and to be as inclusive in all of our language. And we work really hard on that to make sure that we don't tick anybody off. So, so hopefully we haven't done that with anyone. So we didn't ask the question, and there's not that many people who answered the rent question this time. So it's hard to answer that.
Thank you. I think maybe I'll ask my question in a slightly different way, and I might have misspoke because I was asking specifically about the BIPOC community and whether the disparity between renters and owners of property that responded, because we had far more, almost exclusively homeowners that responded. Have you seen either in this survey or in previous surveys that you've done that we're receiving fewer respondents from people from the BIPOC community, so Black, Indigenous, or people of color, because we're not reaching as many renters? So kind of said differently, do you think that the disparity between homeowners and home renters in this survey could have an influence on any of the responses we received?
I think that's an excellent question, and the answer is I don't know. I think it's a strong hypothesis. I really do, and so that's great. And that's some research. Like Frank, Jeff and I are about to go into the process of redesigning the questionnaire for the next time. So maybe that's something that we can do when we look at that process. Not this question, the BIPOC question, but the question about the rent piece as well, to try and reach out to a greater proportion of those who rent in the town versus those that don't. And then we can make a more informed decision, or answer the question. Now, are people who identify as member of a BIPOC community more likely to be living in rental housing? I wouldn't want to. I haven't noticed that in data elsewhere, but so I wouldn't want to comment one way or the other. I just don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for the long answer to Ron. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. My question was wordy, and I appreciate the detail you went into. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Langmaid. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you very much. I just have a question for clarification on that list that was just up on the screen. I think it's page 17 of 54, the one about what do you like least about living in Strathmore. So like number 7 says discrimination / diversity. Now, is that saying that people, obviously, like nobody likes dealing with discrimination. So obviously like that's kind of, easy to understand why people would not like that about somewhere. But is the diversity part, is that people who are, and it doesn't say lack of diversity, but are people saying that they like the lack of diversity least about Strathmore, or are people saying that they like diversity? They don't like the diversity of Strathmore. I'm not clear on which one that is.
I think you're right that would be better described as lack of diversity.
Okay.
So we received 550 responses to this question, and this is our attempt at trying to summarize. Some people were quite wordy and wrote novels, and so it's not fair to them because we summarize it with one word, maybe amenities or something like that. And so, but what we're really looking for when we look at any open-ended questions, we're looking for themes, we're looking for repetition, and we're looking maybe for someone who's got a really good idea. No one else might have expressed it, so it might not be really high in the counts, but it'll be, it's a great idea. What we don't want to do is try and really focus on one or two comments, might go really, really off on, like, don't ever hire super tall guys as market research people, whatever that thing is, right? Because it might just be one person's opinion. So you have to be very, very careful with open-ended questions. And quite frankly, you might come back and you might read the detailed comments that came back and say, well, they have them reclassified as discrimination diversity, and they're actually talking about too many tall people or something, right? So it is our best guess, and we do it diligently for here. But it's always very careful. It's our attempt to turn words into numbers, and it's not always a very clean thing to do.
Okay, so if we're talking about lack of diversity, then it's possible that some dissatisfaction is just to do with the fact that people would like to see more diversity, I guess you could call it, in Strathmore. So like, it's not necessarily something that we're doing. And so I guess I'd be interested more to see, I guess, if that could be separated in the future. Like, as discrimination is obviously, that's something that we should be looking to reduce or stamp out. But I mean, something like diversity or, the lack of diversity, that's, I think that's kind of out of our wheelhouse, to have an effect on. So in the future, I would appreciate if those could be kind of teased out a bit more.
I think that's a very, very good observation, and we will do that, sir.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the report and for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
Please do.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Montgomery. Any other questions from councillors? Seeing none. Thank you, Alec, for your presentation. It was very
I
informative.
apologize for going over time. I just get really excited.
That's absolutely great. We enjoyed it. Jeff or CAO School, did you want to add anything as far as the presentation and the report?
No, just the comments are noted and the follow-up and promoting it in the community. That's all noted.
Okay, thank you. Anything from Jeff or Kara? Nope, we're good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Sorry, you just flashed up on screen, Jeff. Any comments? Okay, good. All right, we move on to the next agenda item. Item 5, there's no consent agenda. Brings us to 6, confirmation of minutes. 6.1, regular council meeting minutes for January 19th, 2022. Councillor Langmaid.
I'll move that council adopt the January 19th, 2022 regular council meeting minutes as presented.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor from Councillor Langmaid. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We have no tabled items, and that brings us to item 8, items or reports from administration. 8.1, Community Futures Wild Rose MOU, which is found on page 75 of the agenda. And Jeff, are you speaking to this one? Okay, thank you.
I am. Thank you very much, Your Worship. So Kristen presented on this just before the holiday break there. And what this is our approach to economic development has been layering on all like a variety of different programs and services to help the economy recovery in Strathmore. Community Futures Wild Rose provided a program proposal in the fall that was brought for your consideration and that council approved. This MOU was created by Community Futures Wild Rose, and it outlines the specifics for the program. It's a really detailed MOU, and this is something that's really useful for us. We really encourage council to approve the signing of the document so that we can begin to roll out the program. Happy to take any questions from council.
Thank you. Yeah, perfect. Any questions from councillors before we put a motion on the floor? Are there any questions for Jeff? Seeing none, is the council prepared to make a motion? Councillor Peterson.
Your worship, I would move the council authorize mayor and chief administrative officer to sign the memorandum of understanding between the town and Community Futures Wildrose for the delivery of a digital economy program.
Thank you for that motion. And is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, again, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion? And the motion is carried. Thank you. That brings us. Thank you, Jeff. Sorry, I cut you off there. Thank you for your presentation. And that brings us to 8.2, revised town council meeting schedule. And Jonathan, you're presenting on this one, the fifth one.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. So during that January 26th Committee of the Whole meeting, Council indicated a desire to reschedule the second meeting of the month to be a Committee of the Whole. So with that in mind, administration is bringing forward two requests. The Council approved the revised schedule as presented, and that we rescind Resolution 358.10.21, which just approved the current schedule that we're following right now, that we approved last October. And that council rescheduled the February 9th and 16th regular council meetings to be held virtually.
So Jonathan will be doing those in two separate motions then?
That's correct, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillors? Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you very much. So I will move that council adopt the regular council meeting schedule as presented in attachment 1, and the council rescind resolution number 358.10.21.
And is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? And the motion is carried. And Deputy Mayor, did you want to do a second motion?
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. I will move that council reschedule the February 9th and 16th, 2022 regular council meetings to be held virtually.
Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That brings us to 8.3, letter to the Minister of Public Safety regarding the RCMP retroactive pay, which is on page 97. And Jonathan, you're presenting on this?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship and Council. Excuse me. On January 17th, 2022, MP Martin Shields contacted the town of Strathmore requesting that we send a letter addressed to the Minister of Public Safety outlining 3 concerns regarding RCMP pay raises and retroactive pay. The first being municipalities were not involved in negotiations. Second, the agreement will cause an increase in property taxes or potential increase in property taxes. And third, a request that the federal government cover all retroactive salary payments. Administration is recommending that council authorize the mayor to sign the attached letter.
Thank you, Jonathan. Are there any questions for Jonathan on the potential letter? Then I'm looking for a motion. Councillor Wegener. I think you're muted. Yep.
I move that council authorize the mayor to sign the letter to the Minister of Public Safety regarding the RCMP retroactive pay as presented in attachment 1.
Now that the motion is on the floor, is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you. Now we move on to 8.4, joint Wheatland County and Town of Strathmore letter to CMRB regarding withdrawal, page 103. Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
I have a motion if you're ready for that.
Thank you. Perfect.
I'll move the council authorize the mayor to sign a joint letter with Wheatland County to the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board requesting a letter of support for the withdrawal from the CMRB as presented in attachment 1.
Any discussion or comments on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that motion is carried. We move on now to item 9, committee reports. 9.1, Wheatland Housing Management Board meeting minutes for November 18th, 2021, page 107. And for the public at home, if you don't have the agenda or you don't necessarily have it with you, we have the meeting, the board meeting minutes here in our counselor packages. So it's just a, and Kara, maybe I can turn to you. Do we need to have a motion to approve these or accept them as information? I think we've moved away from that, haven't we?
That is correct, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on these from the councillors who sit on the housing board? No, okay. And 9.2 is the board meeting minutes for the Wheatland Housing Management Board for January 18th, 2022. Any comments from the councillors on that? Seeing none, we will move on then. Item 10 is items directly related to council. We have nothing there. We have no bylaws tonight for item 11. Urgent business 12.1. Councillor Langmaid has brought forward an item dealing with Black History Month. Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you, Your Worship. As many of you know, February is celebrated in Canada and Alberta as Black History Month. People of varying backgrounds call Strathmore home. And I believe that it's really important as we focus on anti-racism initiatives in our community, that we also work on initiatives to celebrate the diversity of our town and also increase the inclusion and ensure that everyone who lives here is included. So that being said, I would like to bring forward this proclamation to council to consider that we proclaim February 2022 Black History Month in Strathmore.
Thank you for that. And sorry, I missed the first little part. You have made the motion for that, is that correct?
I have not yet made the motion. If anyone wanted to have a discussion on it before we move the motion.
Well, are there any questions for Councillor Langmaid on her potential motion or what she's mentioned so far? Seeing none, Councillor Langmaid.
Then I'd like to make the motion that council proclaim February 2022 as Black History Month in the town of Strathmore.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Langmaid. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor. Oh, Councillor Mitzner.
I have a question. Is this something we're doing for this February only, or is it February yearly? Why don't we make a motion for February year to year? We have to reconsider it year after year?
I spoke with Jonathan Strathy about this earlier today, and perhaps he can give a better explanation of why it's for this year only instead of moving forward.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you.
Jonathan?
Thank you, Worship and Council. In the coming months, hopefully in March, administration will be presenting council with a proclamation policy. And in that's going to be some language that will hopefully approve a list of standing proclamations for the future. And if council so wishes, Black History Month would be a part of that list.
Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Wiley.
I won't be supporting the motion, but I think in the future I might be, given what Jonathan was talking about, a proclamation list. I think one of the problems with having, we try to be inclusive, but what happens is you end up excluding people. And what I mean by that is, so you have a Black History Month, but then do we have an Indigenous Peoples Month? And do we have a Pioneers History Month? And so on and so forth. So maybe if it was part of a bigger package to try and look at all the different groups you're wanting to recognize, perhaps, but I have nothing against Black History Month. I just won't be supporting the motion.
Thank you for the comments. Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that I'm grateful for Councillor Limeade for bringing this forward. I think that motions on inclusion often speak to populations that have been excluded in the past. And so when we look to our deficits and we look to correct those things, that we do a great service to the community that we are recognizing and to the community that steps in as allies to that community. As a mother and grandmother of Black children and grandchildren, I'm very grateful for this. And I know the comfort that it brings to people who have suffered marginalization through no fault of their own over many centuries. And unfortunately, Canada is not exempt from those travesties. And so bringing awareness and opportunity and mindfulness to this is something that I'm very grateful for. And I do support the motion, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other discussion or comments from other councillors? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion? And the motion is carried. Oh, sorry, opposed? We have one opposed, so 6-1 in favor. Thank you very much. We move now to questions between councillors and council statements. Seeing none. Administrative inquiries. I imagine when we have the procedural bylaw, if it gets approved, then that will no longer see that if that is the way it goes. Okay, thank you. We move now to 15 in camera. I'm looking for a motion to go in camera, and if you could cite the FOIP section. Councillor Regener, thank you.
I move that council move in camera to discuss an item related to section 24(1)(a) of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you. And we are going